Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. An historic day for drug pricing. The Biden administration negotiated down 10 of Medicare's costliest prescriptions. CMS Administrator Chiquita Brooks-LaSure explains.
There are people across this country who are choosing between living and dying, whether or not to put food on the table.
And anticipating the potential long-term effects.
We all are committed to making sure that drug companies will continue to want to innovate.
Then influencers and the election.
Does hope work on social?
Of course it does. How do you think I have 40 million followers?
Social media and advertising guru Gary Vaynerchuk, known to those 40 million as Gary V, reaching voters online.
Love and hope and optimism is hard. Fear and negativity and cynicism is easy and lazy. Most people aren't talented enough for hope.
Plus, the rest of today's news that got us squawking, like Columbia University's president stepping down months after campus protests. Some might say, finally.
There's probably some people who are sad today and other people who are quite happy.
It's Thursday, August 15th, 2024. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Andrew by in 3, 2, 1. Cue Andrew.
Good morning and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Andrew Sorkin along with Kelly Evans and Mike Santoli. Welcome. Stepping in for Joe and Becky, who are both off. We are just learning some of the details about the pay package that enticed Chipotle CEO Brian Niccol to leave to run Starbucks. In a filing yesterday, Starbucks disclosed it will pay Niccol a base salary of $1.6 million annually with incentives that could net him an additional $7.2 million more in cash. He's also going to be eligible for annual equity awards worth up to $23 million. And for leaving Chipotle, Niccol will receive a $10 million cash bonus, also $75 million in equity that will vest over a 3 to 4 year period. One perk for Niccol, he won't be required to relocate to the company's headquarters in Seattle. His primary office will be in Seattle, but Starbucks will also pay for a remote office to be set up in Newport Beach, California, where Niccol lives. Niccol agreed to commute to Seattle and travel as needed to do his job. Starbucks will pay for housing costs in Seattle for Niccol for up to 3 months while he finds a secondary accommodation there.
Pay him more.
What do you say?
Pay him more. I mean, you know the scope of the job he is taking on.
And look, he created overnight $20 billion. So you're not paying less than that for...
The incentives are aligned. A lot of this is in shareholder equity. Presumably he has to hit certain targets in order to receive. It is interesting detail, though, about the kind of work from home nugget.
And then he's going to have to travel back and forth.
Yeah, these guys are traveling all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Chipotle is in Orange County, right? So they are. That's why he's in Newport Beach.
I believe that Chipotle moved to Orange County.
That's right.
He
used to be in Denver or Colorado
because of where he lived.
Exactly. Yeah.
The president of Columbia University, Medicare, is resigning from the university. She is the third leader of an Ivy League university to step down in the last 8 months. It follows heavily criticized appearance before Congress about anti-Semitism on campus. The doctor said her resignation was effective immediately, and she would be taking a job with Britain's foreign secretary. She said the recent period of turmoil had taken a toll on her family, and she decided that moving on would be best to enable Columbia to traverse the challenges ahead. In a statement, Columbia's board co-chairs said they were disappointed to see her leave, but understand and respected her decision. Last spring, she faced a lot of backlash from students and faculty for summoning police to campus to clear an occupied building. At the same time, others in the community, including major donors, said she had not done enough to protect Jewish students on campus. And I should say that while the resignation appears to be a resignation, there was a lot of movement, even in the past couple of weeks behind the scenes, from what I understand, to try to push for some of these things, too. So I think there was a lot of a push-pull.
Is that because the school year is about to start and they felt like this was the moment to...
I just think that there were, from what I understand from the donor class, there was a group of people who had been very frustrated and had been trying to, so I think there's probably some people who are sad today and other people who are quite happy.
Yeah. Former President Trump is making his economic pitch at a speech in Asheville, North Carolina yesterday. Take a listen.
Vote Trump and your incomes will soar, your savings will grow, young people will be able to afford a home, and we will bring back the American dream bigger, better, and stronger than ever before.
In that speech, Trump also pledged 10 to 20% tariffs on foreign countries that have, quote, been ripping us off for years. He also pledged to slash energy and electricity prices by at least half within the first 12 to 18 months if he's elected. His comments come ahead of Vice President Harris's rollout of her economic platform. She's expected to begin testing that messaging during a speech tomorrow in Raleigh, North Carolina. Her campaign said yesterday the plan would include rating in housing costs and prescription drug prices. She also plans to call for a federal ban on corporate price gouging on groceries. Here was Trump's response when asked about that last night.
There's no such thing as her going out and doing that. What you want to do is create the incentive so that people can't cheat, they can't price gouge. And the way you do that is drill for oil and get everything down, and all of a sudden people can't do that.
Now, I haven't seen I don't know if anybody has seen the details yet of exactly how she would go after the grocery price gouging question, which
it's a hard one.
Yeah.
People have talked about doing something for a long time. I don't know what doing something for a long time means. You can
have
talk
they talked about
it.
doing something for a long time? You mean, is this post-pandemic or just
we've been hearing about gouging for forever, which is, shrinking the bags.
Shrinkflation.
All of that.
Is shrinkflation gouging, or is it my expenses went up and therefore I'm trying to pass that along in the best way I can?
Or the the markup thing where the prices are faster to go up than to come down, and is there some way to calibrate that?
Look, the interesting part to me has always been you've heard the Biden administration and the president himself go at this idea that corporate America is gouging you, right? And then if you talk to his Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, and you say, is the corporations, are they gouging? She says, no, there's this thing called supply and demand, and that's sort of where we are.
Does she really go?
You get an economist, and they're not going to really buy into it. Yeah, exactly.
Well, they should ban Econ 101 if they think that people aren't going to. Who, after taking that, would think, this is going to work?
But politician's job is to sort of make gestures in the direction of the thing you want to happen and hope that it happens on its own.
Sure.
And that's kind of what's been going on. The Inflation Reduction Act hit at the peak in inflation by pure luck and by pure societal pendulum swing of, wow, it's time for something called the Inflation Reduction Act. And it wasn't because of what was in there.
Well, the pendulum swing now is, as we've talked about, all I do, I go in the grocery, I check potato chip prices. And they're all, the peak was $6.50, but we've talked about this before. It's not coming down national. They're starting to discount. Yeah. This is how the market works. This is how, anyway.
No doubt about it. Yeah. I mean, VCs aren't like staking new grocery chains because they feel like it's going to be durable profitability.
4% profit margins.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, for the first time, the White House has negotiated down the cost of 10 common prescription drugs for seniors. Medicare Administrator Chiquita Brooks-LaSure joins us.
We'll be monitoring and making sure that plans are not playing games with the drugs that we have negotiated prices for.
What today's first step for the administration, a landmark part of the Inflation Reduction Act, means for the future of all drug innovation and American healthcare. Right after this break. And we're back. This is Squawk Pod.
You are watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin, along with Kelly Evans and Mike Santoli. Joe and Becky are off today. We got some news out this morning from the White House. The result of the first Medicare drug price negotiation. Bertha Coombs is here with a look at how drug price plans will change next year for beneficiaries and also insurers. Bertha.
That's right, Andrew. Big changes coming. The administration is touting $6 billion in savings when those new negotiated prices go into effect. But that's not until 2026. There are some fundamental changes to Medicare Part D under the IRA that could actually raise costs in the near term. Next year, out-of-pocket costs for Part D beneficiaries will be capped at $2,000, which HHS estimates will save patients $7.4 billion next year. Under a new program, they'll also be able to smooth out their drug costs over time, kind of like buy now, pay later. That extra coverage is going to mean higher Part D premiums, but those premium increases will be capped at 6%, which means that insurers will face higher costs after patients reach that $2,000 cap, because the government is also scaling back its share of payments or reinsurance for brand names from 80% to 20% of the cost, and for generics from 80% down to 40%. Now, CMS says initial 2025 Part D premium bids from insurers more than doubled as a result, but they are offering insurers the option of subsidies for the first 3 years to help stabilize premiums during this transition. And as a result, CMS tells me for patients, base premiums for Part D will go up about $2 next year. Nonetheless, it's going to be a big shift for patients in terms of what they're going to be responsible for these drugs.
What are you hearing from the drug makers?
The drug makers have said, as they've reported their earnings, that these prices, if you take a look at some of the prices, Imbruvica, that's a huge one. That's a big cancer drug. The IRA price is going to be $9,300. Just over $9,300. Drug makers have been complaining that some of these, discounts are going to be huge, but that's about a 38% discount according to CMS. We don't know what the apples to apples are in terms of what the PBMs that negotiate for each of these plans had actually be getting as a discount. But if you look at the out-of-pocket for patients, according to drug channels, the average out-of-pocket for patients on Imbruvica is about $6,500 a year. Next year, it'll be $2,000.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm just curious what, if they think that'll disincentive, whatever. We'll get into that.
We're going to get into all of it. Bertha, don't go anywhere because we've got to be part of this conversation. Chiquita Brooks-LaSure, administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, joins us this morning. You just heard the report that Bertha provided. I don't know if you have any context or thing you want to add to it, but I do think there is this question really underlying what you were just suggesting, which is the incentives here and what do you think ultimately happens? There's a lot of good that comes out of it in the short term, but what are the impacts in the long term?
I did hear the report, and let me just start by saying thank you for having me. This is a historic day that we are so excited about, that thanks to the President Biden, Vice President Harris, that for the first time, Medicare is able to negotiate the price of drugs. And I just want to say how important this is, how life-changing this has been to the millions of seniors that I have been talking to over the last 2 years, how much relief there is in this country that the president and the vice president have taken on drug pricing. There are people across this country who are choosing between living and dying, whether or not to put food on the table, whether or not to see their grandkids. And I think it's really important as we talk about all of these issues about what prices are going to be like, what innovation is going to happen, that we really keep at the core of that this country is full of drug companies that are making the most innovative drugs. But if people don't have access to them, it doesn't matter. And what we did in negotiation, what we did in the overall law, is make it more possible for people to be able to get access to, we started with these 10 drugs, but even more than that, this out-of-pocket cap, it is a game changer for our economy, for not just for the seniors and the people who depend on this program, but for their children, for my children and our future children. So I just want to make sure we don't lose track of that.
No, and as you say, it's a life or death issue if you can afford these medicines, but it's also a life or death issue if they will exist in the future. And companies from Roche to Bristol Myers to others are saying this will disincentivize the development. It's billions of dollars, high stakes development for things, especially for rare diseases and cancer. And yes, rare diseases are exempted, but they might not be if they have other uses. And then therefore that disincentivizes their development. Are you sure that this is going to make sure that cures like cancer, which is he keeps saying this is the most important objective for him, that this incentivizes those cures to continue to be developed and available in the marketplace?
There are so many factors that go into a drug company's decision. And I have worked in the industry, I understand, and we have thought about that when we talked with the companies and worked on negotiation. We all are committed to making sure that drug companies will continue to want to innovate. It is crucial that we have a strong market, and we included that in our process. That was baked into the law to include things like research and development costs, to include things like how much does it cost. We thought about things like, are you saving money to the Medicare program overall? So I don't want to leave the impression that by allowing Medicare to negotiate, just like everybody else does, just like your employer insurance does, just like the VA does, that we are not going to allow innovation to continue. It absolutely will continue.
Administrator, I want to pick up on that point in terms of others negotiating. There are concerns from people that the law doesn't really address what the pharmacy benefit managers, what the plans do in terms of their negotiations. And even if you have these prices, that might not necessarily be the preferred drug. There are some people who are concerned that you still might have these drugs on a different tier. What sort of moves are you going to make sure that patients get this price and that they are actually paying their copays based on this price in the plans?
Certainly, this is an issue that we are thinking we are monitoring very closely. And I would say a couple of things. The law clearly outlines that PBMs and health plans that provide coverage for these drugs need to put them on the formulary. We will be monitoring and making sure that plans are not playing games with the drugs that we have negotiated prices for. We take very seriously both parts of it. Getting a deal for Medicare, getting a good deal for the Medicare beneficiaries, but also making sure they get access, because as we are talking about, making sure that there is access, it's important. It's important to the people. It's also important to the drug companies.
Administrator, I want to thank you for joining us on this important day. Appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing us the news.
Next on Squawk Pod, the power of the influencer. From a first ever White House Creator Summit to the social media charged campaign trail. Entrepreneur with, a lot of followers, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Fortune 500 companies are grossly under-investing in influencer marketing. And it's wild to see that the candidates are starting to, and the White House is starting to understand the power of it.
It's never been this bad before, the way we treat each other in politics.
This is Squawk Pod from CNBC.
But you break through in ways that I think are going to change the entire dynamic of the way in which we communicate. And that's why I invited you to the White House, because I'm looking for a job.
Up and Andrew, Q.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. President Biden hosting 100 creators and influencers at the White House yesterday. It's the first creator economy conference. Both the administration and the Trump and Harris campaigns have tapped into social media to spread their message. Joining us right now is an expert, the expert, I will say, in social media messaging. Gary Vaynerchuk is here, Vayner chairman. Good morning to you.
Morning.
So how do you think this election is going to play out on social? Who's winning right now?
I mean, look, America's 50-50. Who's winning? Both, neither. Depends how you want to look at it. I think what's most important is when you think about what they did yesterday, I think for the people that are watching this program, I'm stunned that Washington, D.C. is sometimes ahead of Madison Avenue. I think the real punchline is that Fortune 500 companies are grossly under-investing in influencer marketing. And it's wild to see that the candidates are starting to, and the White House is starting to understand the power of it, because these humans are media outlets, no different than CNBC. Right. You know, your platform, my platform, your platform. So I think, how is it going to play out? I think it's going to play out. I think we're so polarized, people are going to vote the way they're going to vote. They're not going to have an influencer change their mind. But I think the business impact is huge.
But what do you think of the idea of a campaign reaching out to influencers to use them and to leverage them, if you will, in these campaigns, including potentially, and I don't know the truth of it, you may actually know more about it, there's some sort of, it's almost an accusation or speculation among some influencers that some of these campaigns are going to start paying the influencers on their behalf.
I mean, as long as they're disclosing that, like they're supposed to do on everything, right? If this water pays an influencer, they're putting hashtag ad. Right. FTC's pretty clear on this. Again,
and I don't know if that's happening. You're starting to see some influencers talk about that.
I mean, wouldn't it be worse if they didn't pay them in a weird way, or if they would?
I don't know. It's a very interesting issue.
I think it's less of an issue and more of a dawn of starting to understand that at the end of the day, attention is the punchline. back to the format we're on now and presidential elections. If you go into your history books, kids, the JFK-Nixon debate played out very differently on radio than it did on television.
Right.
I don't know how people don't get this. The Obama win and the Trump win, 8 years apart, happened because of social media. The reason that people continue to be confused...
But not the Obama win, but the Trump win. Do we have social media
of course,
in 2008?
If you go break down...
Barely, I mean...
Not barely. The 2008 Facebook execution that the Obama campaign did is historic and the preview to 2016 Trump Twitter. Social media has the attention of the end consumer at a scale that our society continues even now to underestimate, and those who know how to create, communicate, and execute on it win.
Which platforms do you think are winning? Meaning, Donald Trump going on X the other night with Musk. How much influence does that have versus whatever you think he's doing or she's doing now on TikTok or Instagram?
I think both campaigns are grossly under executing on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Interesting.
LinkedIn.
TikTok, as we all know, kids talk but don't vote. I'm a businessman. This is just practical to me. I think both campaigns are getting caught up in the same thing that Fortune 500 companies are getting caught up in. They're going to the cool place.
But wait a minute. You just said that Facebook in 08 and 20, you could have said at the time, it's just the kids votes don't matter, but they evidently mattered. So shouldn't you go to the hot new thing now?
There's some good validity to what you're saying there, but in 08, it was such momentum and of such a different time, such a unique campaign. Plus, kids only vote during times of hope. Kids vote when there's hope and optimism. There's no hope and optimism in the air right now. Let there be no confusion. There is nothing but fear being weaponized. There's no hope in the air. So that's one.
I think Harris is trying to be a hope candidate. I think even
the problem is I respect that, and that's a great call. But I think it's got to be contextual. If you look at 2024's version of hope, it looks very different than 16 years ago, and definitely different than Clinton and JFK. We're in a very different place. But I do want to say this: Facebook is grossly underpriced organic reach. That's the other thing. Unlike spending a fortune on a television commercial or a billboard, when you know how to do content on social as a business, as an entrepreneur, and as a candidate, you get reach for free.
Well, it's expensive now. I mean, if you do organically, but if you do ads, it's really gotten expensive.
It's dramatically cheaper than every other medium in the world. Google, AdWords, television, print. It's not. It's more than free. But the price of the CPMs is dramatically underpriced. And there's another thing. All of this is based on reach. How many people can you reach? Social media, because of the way the news feed works, you don't know that the next picture or video is an ad. When I watch CNBC, when you're like, all right, we'll see you after this, I know an ad's coming. When I look at, I'm in my phone when I'm in a car, I don't see the billboard. More social media ads are actually consumed on their reach than the potential reach of every other medium. And their CPMs are lower. So I would argue it's underpriced. That's above and beyond the fact that organic reach is free.
Can I ask you just a different question about this hope idea for a second?
Yeah, please.
Does hope work on social?
Of course it does. How do you think I have 40 million followers?
No, I think it does.
Me too. There's only two extremes. There's hope, which is hard.
Right.
Love and hope and optimism is hard. Fear and negativity and cynicism is easy and lazy. Yes, hope works. The problem is most people aren't talented enough for hope.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So it becomes this sort of, train wreck, everybody's, rubbernecking, and that seems to work.
That becomes societal accountability. Before we blame the candidates and social media and our parents, I actually think it's time for everyone to, instead of pointing fingers, to point thumbs. If you are leaning into cynicism and negativity, that's your fault.
That's an awesome message. Before we let you go, you're heading over. I'm going tomorrow, dressed in full gear as my Jordan uniform from the old days.
Well, I don't like that because I'm a diehard Knicks fan and I hate Michael Jordan.
I get it. I, by the way, grew up in New York and I was a self-loathing Knicks fan for the last 20 years. But back in the day, we're supposed to go.
Grows up in New York.
No, Knicks
I understand.
We talked about a lot of important stuff. This is the most important. You are not allowed to be a Michael Jordan fan if you were an over 35-year-old Knicks fan.
It's a Birmingham Barons Michael Jordan jersey.
All right, fair.
So my question.
Anyway, yes.
So you're going to be there.
I will be there. Fanatics Fest is going to be.
And you just
monstrous.
did VCon.
I just did VCon. I just did the National Sports Card Convention. I am on the road this summer.
So what are you doing tomorrow?
Tomorrow I'm setting up the VFriends booth. I'm building a Pokemon meets Marvel IP. And so we have a very substantial setup next to MLB and WWE. So 10-year-old me is pumped. But I'm also speaking on a keynote panel on Sunday about the state of the hobby. So like the business of collectabilities. And I'm going to be mingling and shaking hands and kissing babies.
What's the state of NFTs?
Like I said, in the hype of it, 99% went to zero.
Right.
Just like 99% of sneakers and watches and trading card and art is worth zero. And right now the 1% continue to hold, but the macro brand is in the garbage. Just like in 2000, the web brand was in the garbage because all the stocks collapsed. But the macro technology of the blockchain is profound. And actually right now is the time to be very thoughtful.
But is there like a value play to buy the apes now?
Yeah, what's the 1%?
If apes is Nike, if apes is Lacoste, no. And that becomes the question of like, who's the CEO? You look at what Starbucks just
You've
did.
been right about a lot of this stuff, so.
I feel very right about, I think most people.
What would you be buying right now?
I honestly, I don't want to guess and be wrong.
Right.
One of the reasons I tend to be right is I don't like guessing. I think a lot of people misunderstood the NFT market. Again, which is why I was saying 99% are going to zero, 99%, but nobody hears that when things are hyped. Nobody hears like, be careful about inflation coming on the back of us printing unlimited money. They just go buy Dom Perignon and LVMH products.
Gary Vaynerchuk, thank you for bringing us some hope this morning.
Thank you.
Kelly Evans, Mike Santoli, thank you for hanging out this morning.
Thanks for having us.
And that's the pod for today. Thanks for listening today or any day that you do. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. Get the best of our show right into your ears when you follow Squawk Pod. And tell a friend to listen too. Sharing is caring. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.